Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive.
It's great to be back.
As always, we're bringing you a deep dive into the day's most important current affairs.
Especially for those of you gearing up for the UPSC exams.
Exactly.
We know you need to stay on top of everything happening.
And this is March 30th, 2025, Part 2.
Part 2, that's
So we're going to cover a range of topics.
Yeah, we're going to go from governance and the economy to
the environment,
international relations, even some science and technology sprinkled in there.
Perfect.
A little bit of everything, really.
Just like the UPSC syllabus.
Exactly. And, as always, we've pulled from a variety of sources.
Trying to get a well-rounded perspective for you.
Absolutely. A 360-degree view, you could say.
So our mission today is to break down these complex issues.
Distill them into those key takeaways.
And help you see the connections between them.
Because, sometimes the news can feel like a bunch of random events.
Totally. But we're going to try to create a narrative thread.
Exactly. Weave it all together into a coherent story.
So you can walk away with a deeper understanding.
And some, potentially valuable insights for your exam preparation.
Okay, so first up, let's dive into a topic that's making waves in India's maritime sector.
The Indian Ports Bill 2025.
Right. Sounds pretty significant.
It is. It's actually set to replace the very outdated Indian Ports Act of 1908.
Wow. 1908. That's,
Yeah, a relic of the past, you could say.
Times have changed.
Drastically so.
So what's the main goal behind this new bill?
Well, it's all about modernizing our port laws.
Makes sense.
Streamlining things, creating a more integrated approach to development.
Integrated how so?
Well, imagine if our ports weren't just operating in isolation, but working together seamlessly as a network.
Oh, like a well-oiled machine.
Precisely. And the bill also emphasizes optimal utilization of our coastline.
Which is
extensive.
Thousands of kilometers.
Right. Crucial for trade and connectivity.
Absolutely. Our ports are gateways to the world.
So who exactly does this bill apply to? It's pretty comprehensive. It covers existing ports, new ones that will be established.
Future-proofing.
It also applies to navigable rivers within port limits.
Interesting.
Any vessel operating within those limits.
Okay.
And even aircraft using port waters.
Wow, so it casts a pretty wide net.
It does. It's about creating a unified framework.
I see. Now there's this Maritime State Development Council being proposed.
The MSDC.
Yeah.
What's its role?
It'll be established by the central government.
Okay.
And get this, it will be chaired by the Union Minister of Ports, Shipping, and Waterways.
So a lot of power concentrated there.
It signifies a more centralized approach.
Makes sense.
Which could lead to faster decision-making.
Streamlining things.
Exactly. But it also raises questions about the role of states.
Yeah, what about state autonomy?
Right. The bill does propose state maritime boards, or SMBs.
Okay, so states have some say.
They do. These boards will manage non-major ports.
Interesting.
And they'll inherit existing debts and obligations related to those ports. Oh, so it's not a complete takeover by the center.
Not at all. It's a balancing act.
Trying to find that sweet spot.
Exactly.
Now, disputes are bound to arise.
In any sector, really.
Especially one as complex as this.
True. So the bill mandates the establishment of dispute resolution committees, or DRCs.
Okay.
And these will be set up by the state governments.
Each state will have its own?
Yeah, they'll be responsible for adjudicating disputes related to port activity.
Within that state's jurisdiction.
Precisely. And here's the kicker. Civil courts will be excluded.
Oh, so no going to regular courts for these matters?
Nope. It's all about specialized resolution.
Makes sense for a specialized field.
Exactly. Faster, more efficient.
Cutting through the red tape.
You got it.
Now, there's also mention of port officers.
Right. Key personnel within the ports themselves.
What's their deal?
Well, the bill outlines the appointment of conservators and health officers.
So one for operations and one for well-being.
Exactly. The conservator ensures smooth operations, enforces laws and regulations, safety protocols,
You're keeping things running smoothly.
Yep. And the health officer takes care of public health within the port area.
Important in such a busy environment.
Absolutely. Preventing disease outbreaks, ensuring sanitation,
Keeping everyone safe and healthy.
That's the goal.
Now, given the potential for pollution.
A major concern with maritime activities.
What's the bill doing about that?
It mandates all ports to have facilities for receiving and treating vessel waste.
Okay, so no more dumping waste into the sea.
That's the idea. It aligns with international conventions like Marpol,
which is
the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships.
Okay, so we're meeting global standards.
We are. And also the Ballast Water Management Convention.
Which is about
preventing the introduction of invasive species through ballast water.
Ah, right. So it's a multi-pronged approach.
It is environmental responsibility is key.
Absolutely. Lastly, I noticed this term, megaports. What's the significance there?
Well, the central government will have the power to designate both major and non-major ports as megaports.
So it's like a special status?
It is based on certain criteria that they'll define.
Okay.
It's likely this status will be reserved for ports of strategic national importance.
So the big players?
You could say that maybe those handling huge volumes of cargo,
Okay.
or those crucial for our overall trade network.
So they'll get special attention and investment.
Potentially, yes. It's about prioritizing development.
Makes sense. Now let's shift gears a bit.
From ports to electronics.
Right. The government is making some moves to boost electronics manufacturing.
Big time, they've approved this electronics component manufacturing scheme.
With a lot of funding behind it.
A whopping 22,919 crore.
Wow, that's a serious commitment.
The aim is to build a robust domestic ecosystem for electronic components.
So we're not just assembling finished products.
No, we're going deeper into the supply chain.
Making the components ourselves.
Exactly, increasing domestic value.
Right. And integrating Indian companies into global value chains.
Exactly. We want to be players on the world stage.
Not just consumers.
Precisely.
So how will this scheme actually work?
They're using a strategy of differentiated incentives.
Means
Different levels of support for different types of components.
Okay, tailoring the incentives to the specific challenges.
Exactly, because, making a display module is different from making a resistor.
Makes sense. A one-size-fits-all approach wouldn't work.
It wouldn't, so they're being strategic.
And which segments are they specifically targeting?
Well, they're focusing on sub-assemblies, like display modules,
Okay.
and camera modules, which are crucial for smartphones and other devices.
Right. Those are high-value components.
They are, and also bare components, like non-surface mount devices,
Those are...
the building blocks of electronic circuits.
Okay, so really focusing on the fundamentals.
Exactly, building a strong foundation.
So how long will this scheme run?
It'll be in effect for 6 years,
Okay.
including a 1-year gestation period.
So giving companies time to set up.
Exactly, and a portion of the incentive payout will be linked to employment targets.
Oh, so they have to create jobs to get the full benefit?
They do. It's about boosting manufacturing and employment.
A two-pronged approach.
You got it.
Now, the material really emphasizes the strategic importance of this sector.
It's not just about economics.
No, it's about national security as well.
Absolutely. India is actually working with the U.S.
Okay.
to set up a national security semiconductor fabrication plant.
Wow, so we can produce chips for military hardware.
That's the goal, reducing our reliance on foreign
And
sources.
especially for sensitive components.
Exactly. It's about strategic autonomy.
Being self-reliant.
Exactly.
And there's also the issue of supply chain resilience.
Which has become a global buzzword.
It has. We saw the fragility of supply chains during the pandemic.
We did, and India currently imports a lot of electronics.
Over half from China and Hong Kong.
$89.8 billion in FY23.
That's a lot of dependence.
It is. So this scheme aims to diversify our sources.
By boosting domestic production.
Exactly, making our supply chains more resilient.
Less vulnerable to disruptions.
Exactly.
And the economic potential is huge.
The numbers speak for themselves.
Right. India's electronics exports have grown tremendously.
From 0.38 lakh crores in FY14-15.
2.41 lakh crores in FY23-24.
That's a compound annual growth rate of over 20%.
Wow, that's impressive.
And domestic production has also grown significantly.
From 1.9 lakh crores to 9.52 lakh crores.
With a KGR of over 17%.
So it's a win-win.
It has the potential to be...
Boosting the economy, creating jobs, strengthening national security.
Exactly.
Okay, now for something completely different.
Let's talk about fungi.
Fungi.
Yes, the often overlooked but crucial kingdom of life.
I'll admit, my knowledge of fungi is limited to mushrooms.
Fair enough, but there's so much more to them.
So tell me what's the latest?
Well, a recent report from the IUCN...
The International Union for Conservation of Nature.
Yes, they've highlighted a concerning trend. Over 1,000 species of fungi are threatened with extinction.
Wow, I had no idea.
It's a silent crisis.
So how many are we talking about exactly?
The IUCN report lists 1,300 fungi species.
Okay.
And out of those, at least 411 are at risk of disappearing.
That's a significant number.
It is, and it could have serious consequences
Yeah.
the ecosystems they inhabit.
Right, because fungi play a vital role.
They do. They're often called the hidden kingdom
Why is that?
because they're mostly underground or hidden from view.
Okay, but their impact is far-reaching.
Absolutely. So what's driving this decline?
What are the threats?
Well, climate change is a major factor.
Okay.
Changing fire patterns are affecting fungi in the U.S., for example,
Interesting.
like in the Sierra Nevada forests,
Okay.
where certain types of trees are becoming more dominant.
And that's impacting the fungi that depend on other trees.
Exactly. Those fungi are losing their habitat.
I see.
Pollution is another big problem.
Right.
Ammonia runoff from fertilizers.
Okay, that's affecting 91 species.
It is, but the biggest culprit is habitat loss.
Makes sense.
Agricultural expansion, urbanization,
Human encroachment.
Exactly. And that's endangering 279 species.
So we're basically destroying their homes.
We are, and that's a problem because
Because fungi are essential.
they are. They're not just mushrooms.
Right. Tell me more.
Well, they're eukaryotic organisms.
Yeah?
Their cells have a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles.
Okay.
And they used to be classified with plants,
Oh, I see.
but they're quite different.
How so?
Well, for starters, they lack chlorophyll.
So they can't photosynthesize.
Exactly. They can't make their own food like plants.
That's interesting.
And their cell walls are made of chitin,
Or just
same stuff that insect exoskeletons are made of.
Oh, wow.
Whereas plant cell walls are made of cellulose.
So different building blocks.
Exactly. And they get their nutrients through external digestion.
What's that?
They release enzymes to break down organic matter outside their bodies.
Okay.
And then they absorb the nutrients.
So it's like they eat externally.
But away, yes.
Fascinating.
And then there are lichens.
Those weird moss-like things.
Well, they're not actually moss. They're a partnership between a fungus and an alga, or a cyanobacterium.
Like a team?
Exactly. It's a symbiotic relationship.
So what does each partner bring to the table?
The alga or cyanobacterium provides food through photosynthesis.
Okay.
And the fungus provides structure and protection.
Like a home.
You could see that.
So they both benefit.
Mutualism at its finest.
Now, why are fungi so important ecologically?
They play several vital roles. They're decomposers. They break down dead organic matter.
Like leaves and stuff.
Yep. Leaves, wood, animal remains, you name it.
Okay.
And they recycle nutrients back into the soil.
Ah, so they're essential for the cycle of life.
Absolutely. Without them, nutrients would get locked up.
And plants wouldn't be able to grow.
Exactly. The whole ecosystem would suffer.
So they're like nature's recyclers.
You could say that?
And they also form these mycorrhizal associations with plant roots.
Right. These are mutually beneficial partnerships.
So what happens there?
The fungus helps the plant absorb water and nutrients more efficiently,
Okay.
especially phosphorus, which is crucial for growth.
So they're like little helpers?
They are, and in return, the plant provides the fungus with sugars.
A fair trade.
It is a win-win situation.
And beyond ecology, fungi have other uses.
Oh, tons. Well, in the food industry, they're used for fermentation.
Okay.
Bread, cheese, beer, wine.
So they're responsible for some of our favorite things.
They are, and some species are edible themselves.
Say the mushrooms.
Exactly. And they're used in medicine, too,
Okay.
like statins, which are cholesterol-lowering drugs.
Oh, wow. So they're quite versatile.
They are, and get this, scientists have even found fungi that can degrade plastic.
Really?
Yeah, potentially a solution to our plastic pollution problem.
Wow, that's amazing.
So you see, losing fungal diversity is a big deal.
It is. We need to protect these hidden heroes. Now let's move from the hidden kingdom to something a bit more visible.
The Constitution.
Exactly. A recent case has highlighted the importance of freedom of speech.
Imran Pratapgadi versus the state of Gujarat.
Right. A crucial reminder that this right is fundamental.
Even for unpopular opinions.
Exactly. The court emphasized the need to protect free speech.
Even if those in power disagree with what's being said.
So what was this case about?
Well, it started with an FIR against Imran Pratapgadi. He's a member of parliament.
Right.
And the accusation was that he incited enmity between communities.
Serious charge.
It is under Section 153A of the IPC.
And what did the court say?
They ruled that Section 153A requires deliberate intent to promote hatred.
So just expressing an unpopular opinion isn't enough.
No, there has to be a clear intention to incite hatred.
So it's a high bar.
It is to protect free speech.
And the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita also addresses this.
It does. Section 196 deals with speech inciting hatred or disharmony.
Based on religion, race, language, or region.
Exactly. It's about maintaining peace and harmony.
Okay, so it's a delicate balance.
It is between freedom of speech and preventing harm.
And where does the right to free speech come from in India?
Article 19A of the Constitution.
The foundation.
Exactly. It guarantees the right to express opinions,
Okay.
receive and impart information,
Okay.
freedom of the press,
Right.
and even the right to criticize the government.
So it's a broad right,
It's the cornerstone of a democratic society.
but it's not absolute.
No, Article 19.2 allows for reasonable restrictions
Okay.
in certain cases,
No.
threats to national security,
Okay.
public order, decency, morality.
Right, things like that.
Exactly. It's about balancing individual rights with societal interests.
Finding that middle ground.
Precisely.
And the Supreme Court, in this case,
Made a very powerful statement.
what was that?
They said, judges must protect freedom of speech, even if they don't like what was said.
Wow, so they're committed to upholding this right
Absolutely, even when it's uncomfortable.
because it's that important.
Exactly.
Now, the material mentions some past judgments that have shaped our understanding of this.
Right? Yes. Landmark cases that have set precedents.
Can you highlight a few?
Certainly, there's the 1970 case of K.A. Abbas versus the Union of India,
Okay.
which established that a film's impact should be judged as a whole.
Not just based on isolated scenes.
Exactly. Context matters.
And then there's the 2015 case of Shreya Singhal versus the Union of India.
This one affirmed that freedom of thought and expression is fundamental to democracy.
A cornerstone.
Precisely without it, democracy can't function.
And lastly, there's the 2021 case of Manzar Said Khan and Patricia Mukim versus the state of Meghalaya,
This case highlighted the importance of mens rea,
which is,
criminal intent,
okay.
in cases related to inciting hatred.
So you have to prove that the person intended to cause harm.
Exactly. It's not just about the words themselves, but the intent behind them.
Okay, now let's turn our attention to the international arena.
India recently provided humanitarian aid to Myanmar.
Right after a devastating earthquake.
Operation Brahma.
Tell me more about this operation.
Well, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck Myanmar.
Wow, that's powerful.
It was the strongest in 2 years.
Then what did India do?
We immediately dispatched aid and relief supplies,
Okay.
food, water, medicine, shelter,
The essentials.
Exactly, helping those affected by the disaster.
Showing solidarity with our neighbor.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned 7.7 magnitude.
Yes, that's considered a major earthquake.
Capable of causing significant damage.
It is, and this one was particularly shallow.
Meaning?
The depth was only 10 kilometers.
So the impact was more severe?
It was the shallower the earthquake.
The stronger the shaking at the surface.
Exact.
And where was the epicenter?
About 17 kilometers from Mandalay.
One of Myanmar's largest cities.
A major cultural and economic hub.
So the potential for damage was high.
It was.
Now, what caused this earthquake?
It was a result of strike-slip faulting
Okay.
along the Sagang Fault.
The-
The Sagaming Fault, it's a major fault line
Okay.
that runs north to south through Myanmar.
And what's special about this fault?
Well, it marks the boundary between the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates.
So those massive plates are grinding against each other.
They're constantly moving.
Creating tension.
Exactly. And when that tension releases,
Boom, earthquake.
precisely.
So tell me more about this Sagang fault.
Well, it's one of the longest strike-slip faults in the world.
How long?
About 1,500 kilometers.
Wow, that's a long stretch.
It is, and it's very active seismically.
Meaning?
It's prone to earthquakes.
Okay, so a high-risk zone.
You could say that, and it's all because of the Indian plate
Moving northward.
relative to the Eurasian plate.
Creating that friction.
Exactly, building up stress along the fault.
And eventually something has to give.
It does, resulting in earthquakes.
Now, you mentioned strike-slip faulting.
Right?
Can you break down the different types of faults for us?
Certainly a fault is basically a fracture in the Earth's crust where the rocks on either side have moved,
Okay.
and there are different ways they can move.
Okay, so what are the types?
Well, in a normal fault, the hanging wall moves downward.
The hanging wall.
It's the block of rock above the fault plane,
Oh,
and the footwall is the block below.
okay.
So in a normal fault, the hanging wall slides down.
Okay.
These faults are common at divergent plate boundaries,
Where plates are moving apart?
exactly like the East African Rift Valley.
Okay, then what about reverse faults?
In a reverse fault, the hanging wall moves upward.
Opposite of normal.
Exactly. And these occur at convergent plate boundaries.
Where plates are colliding.
Right, pushing against each other,
Yeah.
like in the Himalayas
Okay.
or the Rocky Mountains.
So those majestic mountains are a result of reverse faults.
In part, yes.
Fascinating.
And then there are strike-slip faults.
Like the Sagang fault.
Exactly. In these faults, the movement is horizontal,
So the blocks slide past each other sideways.
like rubbing your hands together.
Okay, I get it.
And a good example is the Anatolia Fault in Turkey.
Okay.
And lastly, we have transform faults.
Another type of strike slip.
They are, but they occur at plate boundaries,
Okay.
where two plates are sliding past each other.
So a specific type of strike slip.
Exactly. And the classic example is the San Andreas Fault.
The infamous one in California.
The one everyone's worried about.
Okay, so those are the main types of fault.
Yep, they're responsible for all the earthquakes we experience.
Now let's move on to some economic news.
Indian bond yields have dropped sharply.
Okay, what's going on there?
Well, it's mainly due to two factors.
Okay.
Increased foreign investment in Indian debt
Okay.
and some policy shifts that have influenced market sentiment.
So more people want to buy Indian bonds.
Exactly. And when demand increases, prices go up.
Okay.
And bond yields move inversely to prices, meaning when prices rise, yields fall.
So higher demand, lower yields.
Precisely.
Okay, now there's also news about the hybrid annuity model.
Issue. Yeah.
A new corridor is being developed under this model.
The Patna-Sasaram corridor in Bihar.
Okay, can you remind us what HAM is all about?
It's a public-private partnership model
Okay.
commonly used for infrastructure projects.
Like roads and highways.
Exactly. So the government provides a portion of the project cost up front,
Okay.
and the private partner invests the rest.
Okay.
And then the government makes annuity payments to the private partner
Over a certain period.
after the project is operational.
So it's a way to share the risk.
It is, and incentivize private investment.
Okay, makes sense. Now shifting to East Asia,
South Korea is battling
a
wildfires.
worst they've ever seen.
Devastating situation.
Can you give us a little geographical context?
Sure, South Korea occupies the southern part of the Korean peninsula,
Okay.
bordered by North Korea to the north,
Okay.
the East Sea to the east,
Also known as the Sea of Japan.
right, and the Yellow Sea to the west.
Okay.
The terrain is largely mountainous,
Okay.
with the Taebaek Mountains running along the east coast.
And the highest peak is...
Mount Hala on Jeju Island.
Jeju, a popular tourist destination.
It is known for its volcanic landscapes and beaches.
And what about rivers?
The Han River flows through Seoul.
The capital?
Exactly, and the Nakdong River is the longest.
Okay, so a diverse landscape.
It is unfortunately facing a severe crisis right now.
Now let's talk about exercise INDRA.
The India-Russia naval exercise.
Right, what's happening there?
The 14th edition is currently underway.
Every 2 years.
Exactly. This year it's happening in two phases.
Okay.
The harbor phase in Chennai
Okay.
and the sea phase in Bay of Bengal.
So first planning and then action.
You got it. And the participating ships include Russian ships, Pechongareski and Algar-Tiden-Sapov,
Okay.
and Indian ships Rana Kuthar,
Okay.
and a P-8I maritime patrol aircraft,
So a show of naval strength,
and cooperation between the two countries.
reinforcing that strategic partnership.
Exactly.
Now there's also news about a second national gene bank in India.
A big step for food security.
Tell me more.
Well, this new gene bank will conserve 10 lakh accessions of crop germplasm.
Wow, that's a lot.
Germplasm is basically the genetic material of plants.
Okay, so we're preserving plant diversity.
Exactly, for future use in breeding and research.
So it's like a backup for our crops.
You could say that.
Protecting against disease outbreaks, climate change, you know.
Exactly, ensuring we have a diverse pool of genes to adapt to future challenges.
And where will this gene bank be located?
The location hasn't been finalized yet.
Okay, but the first one is in New Delhi.
At the ICAR National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, or NBPGR.
Okay, and we also have other gene banks.
Yes, for animals and microbes.
So a comprehensive approach to genetic conservation.
It is recognizing the importance of biodiversity,
Now, there's been a development regarding the Teesta River.
a long-standing issue between India and Bangladesh.
What's the latest?
Well, Bangladesh has welcomed China's participation in a
Right.
project to manage and restore the Teesta River within Bangladesh.
Interesting.
The Teesta originates in Sikkim, flows through West Bengal, and then enters Bangladesh.
Right, and the issue is...
Water sharing,
Okay,
especially during the dry season.
so there's been a proposed treaty,
The Teesta Treaty,
but it's been stalled.
since 2011, mainly due to objections from West Bengal.
Okay, so now China is entering the picture.
So it's a complex geopolitical situation.
It is, with implications for all three countries.
Exactly.
Now, in some defense news, the Indian Army has successfully tested a new drone.
An indigenously developed first-person view armed drone.
FPV?
Yes, it's a significant achievement.
What's so special about this drone?
Well, it's designed for precision strikes
Okay.
against targets like bunkers and vehicles,
Okay.
and it's controlled by a pilot wearing FPV goggles.
So they see what the drone sees.
Exactly, real-time monitoring.
Wow, so it's like a video game?
In a way, yes, but with real-world consequences.
And this is important because...
It reduces risk to our soldiers.
Okay.
They can operate the drone from a safe distance.
And it's made in India.
Entirely boosting our indigenous defense capabilities.
Reducing our dependence on imports.
Exactly.
Now, lastly, there's news about maritime trade legislation.
The Carriage of Goods by Sea Bill 2024.
Okay, what's that all about?
Well, it aims to modernize the laws governing the carriage of goods by sea.
Okay.
It replaces a very old act from 1925.
Wow, time for an update.
It was, and the new bill clarifies responsibilities.
Of carriers and shippers.
Exactly who's liable for what,
Okay.
especially for international shipments.
And it aligns our laws with international conventions.
Like the Hague Rules.
Okay, so we're harmonizing with global practices.
We are making trade smoother.
Now, lastly, there's this mention of photonic chips.
An exciting area of research?
What are they exactly?
Well, they're chips that use light instead of electricity.
Oh, wow.
So instead of electrons moving through wires,
Okay.
it's photons moving through waveguides.
Light waves.
Exactly.
And what are the advantages of that?
Several, actually.
Okay, tell me.
Well, first of all, light is much faster than electricity.
So photonic chips can process data at incredible speeds.
Wow.
And they can handle more data, too.
Higher bandwidth.
You got it. And they're more energy efficient
Okay.
because light doesn't generate as much heat.
Interesting.
And they're immune to electromagnetic interference.
Which is a big problem with electronics.
It is, especially with all the wireless devices we use.
So photonic chips are the future.